One warm spring morning, somewhere in suburban America, a homeowner opens the front door and suddenly stops walking. The sidewalk is moving. At first, it looks like red dust scattered across the concrete. Tiny specks no larger than grains of sand crawling across the cracks in the pavement, along the edges of warm bricks, across garage doors and around windowsills, glowing beneath the morning sun. But then the homeowner steps closer and realizes the ground itself is alive. Thousands of tiny red creatures moving together in complete silence. Most people react the same way. Confusion first, then disgust, then panic, because nothing about them feels normal. They appear suddenly, sometimes overnight. Entire walls and sidewalks covered in tiny red moving dots, where nothing existed the day before. People spray chemicals immediately. They crush them beneath shoes. They search online for infestations, parasites, ticks, signs of toxic mold, anything that explains why their home suddenly seems surrounded by living red dust. But what you are looking at is not an invasion, and it is not random. In fact, the appearance of these tiny red creatures is part of one of the strangest microscopic migrations happening quietly around American neighborhoods every single spring. And the truth becomes much stranger once you realize something important. They are not insects, not even close. The tiny red bugs covering sidewalks across suburban America are arachnids, relatives of spiders, relatives of ticks, ancient microscopic animals whose evolutionary ancestors existed hundreds of millions of years before humans ever built roads, fences, lawns, or houses. These creatures are commonly known as clover mites, and despite how frightening they appear in large numbers, they are almost completely harmless to humans. They do not bite, they do not spread disease, they do not eat wood, they do not destroy homes, they do not drink blood. In fact, most of their lives are spent quietly feeding on algae, clover, grasses, mold, and microscopic plant material growing around your yard completely unnoticed. But the strangest part is not what they eat. The strangest part is how they reproduce, because in many clover mite populations there are no males at all. Nearly every single tiny red creature crawling across your sidewalk is female, and most reproduce through a biological process called parthenogenesis, cloning themselves, creating genetically identical offspring without mating, which means one unnoticed mite hidden beneath damp grass can eventually become thousands, entire populations generated from microscopic copies of the same organism. The first time scientists fully studied this process, it deeply disturbed researchers because it felt less like ordinary reproduction and more like biological duplication happening silently beneath suburban lawns. And suddenly, the explosions of red across sidewalks began making more sense. But researchers studying urban ecosystems discovered something even stranger. Clover mites do not emerge randomly. They appear only when extremely specific environmental conditions align perfectly. Temperature, humidity, surface heat, moisture trapped inside cracks, the chemical condition of nearby grass, the angle of spring sunlight warming concrete after cold nights. The reason they suddenly appear on sidewalks is because concrete absorbs and stores heat faster than soil. To humans, sidewalks feel dead. To clover mites, warm concrete becomes an enormous thermal landscape, a navigational system. The tiny cracks in sidewalks trap moisture long after rain evaporates from the surface. Walls absorb sunlight and slowly radiate heat outward. Window frames create protected warm zones, safe from wind. And these microscopic creatures follow those invisible environmental signals with astonishing precision. The world beneath your feet is not empty. It is alive with temperature gradients, humidity trails, chemical signals, fungal growth, microscopic vibrations, and survival patterns humans never stop long enough to notice. And for a few brief days every year, that hidden world rises to the surface. But there is another reason clover mites disturb people so deeply. When crushed, they leave behind bright red stains that look disturbingly similar to blood. For decades, homeowners believed the creatures were filled with blood-like fluid, which only made them seem more dangerous. But scientists eventually discovered the red color is largely connected to carotenoid pigments, absorbed from the plants and algae they consume. In other words, the bright red streaks people wipe from walls and sidewalks every spring are partially made from concentrated plant pigments, moving through microscopic bodies older than human civilization itself. And once you know this, something strange begins happening psychologically. You stop seeing them as random bugs. You begin seeing them as part of something older, something hidden, something that was already living quietly around human homes, long before humans understood it existed, because clover mites are ancient survivors. The ancestors of mites appeared long before dinosaurs walked the earth, long before birds filled the sky, long before grass covered continents, and long before humans built cities. These tiny creatures survived planetary climate collapse, mass extinctions, ice ages, floods, droughts, and entire ecosystems disappearing over millions of years. And after all of that evolutionary history, they now crawl silently beside modern suburban homes, while most humans barely notice them at all. But perhaps the strangest thing about clover mites is not their biology. It is what their existence reveals about the world humans actually live in. Most people imagine neighborhoods as controlled environments, clean sidewalks, trimmed lawns, organized streets, artificial spaces separated from nature. But the truth is much stranger. Nature never left. Beneath every sidewalk crack, microscopic ecosystems are operating constantly. Predators hunt prey invisible to human eyes. Fungi spread through moist concrete edges. Chemical trails drift through the air. Tiny organisms navigate using heat and humidity patterns too subtle for humans to feel. Entire invisible worlds exist around homes, schools, parking lots, fences, and apartment buildings every single day. Humans only notice them when something rises to the surface in unusually large numbers, and suddenly people panic, because they are briefly forced to see the biological world that has always surrounded them. The next time thousands of tiny red bugs suddenly appear across warm sidewalks after rain, pause for a moment before reaching for poison, because what you are witnessing is not simply a swarm, it is an ancient microscopic species responding to heat, moisture, sunlight, and environmental signals with a level of precision humans are only beginning to understand. Tiny creatures, ancient arachnids, microscopic survivors moving silently through invisible ecosystems beneath the edges of modern life. And whether humans notice them or not, they have been here far longer than we have. And they will likely remain here long after us too. Have you ever seen thousands of these tiny red creatures suddenly appear near your home after rain or warm weather? Tell me where you saw them. Some of the strangest, hidden nature stories I have ever heard began in completely ordinary neighborhoods, just like yours. And if you think the invisible world beneath your sidewalks is strange, wait until you discover what has been quietly living inside the walls of American homes this entire time. Because the next creature most people fear may actually be protecting their house every single night. And once you see it, you may never kill one again.